Hello and welcome back, everyone. Happy Monday on a Wednesday. Today we are going to be doing a read-through of the Dev Diary number 166. It is a pretty meaty one. We did notice some interesting pictures that we haven't really seen before in terms of what looks like mechanics, and so we're going to be reading through that, seeing this type of thing, and this features the non-Spanish content that is going to be featured in Iberian Twilight, so looking forward to it. It is a rather meaty Dev Diary, so let's get into it. Starting off with, of course, our Happy Monday. Greetings, I'm Lufthansa, a narrative designer, and welcome back to 100% Planned Dev Diary. He appears to have been horribly misspelled Happy Monday, but okay, fair enough. He did wish us a Happy Monday, he just spelled it wrong. This will contain the material we were able to squeeze into last week's Dev Diary. Felt warranted a separate, more detailed introduction. So today, we will cover everything from the colonial law variants and electoral fraud, my favorite, arriving with the free patch, to the new paid content associated with countries in Spain's wider orbit, namely Cuba. Oh, that's going to be so cool. Cuba's like a country that's actually just like hyper-playable. You have a bunch of different resources. You got some interesting stuff going on, and it'll be exciting to see them get some content. The Philippines, Morocco, and the Dominican Republic. Interesting to see Morocco get content too. So without further ado, hey, we got another ado. Let's jump straight into it. That's what we said. So, colonial administrations. Hello, this is Victoria. Not Lufthansa? Oh, surely she wishes us a happy Monday. Presenting us... Nope, just kidding. Presenting some pieces of free narrative content coming in Update 1.12. Please note, as ever, look at this. A seasoned professional front-loading us immediately with the work in progress, not necessarily going to be the thick case. The Republic of Austria is no more, or Australia is no more. Henceforth, colonies will have a governance principle law variant of their own. This is exciting. Australia really needs a little bit of love in terms of the resources and this type of stuff. They have like 5 arable land on a good day, and so would love to see them get a touch up on the resources. So always pleasure to see Australia mentioned. The colonial administration law variant represents non-sovereign colonial administration such as Cuba, Puerto Rico, or the East India Company, providing a sharp increase in political strength to bureaucrats and officers. Interesting. So we see a variant on monarchy here, giving authority, legitimacy, and, as mentioned, bureaucrats and officers, which is going to empower the armed forces and the petite bourgeoisie quite a bit more than kind of the normal standard fare. Interesting. At the beginning of the game, colonial administrations will have the subjecthood law with the colonial racialization amendment attached. This law setup represents the administrative reality of colonial administration. Whilst colonized people were discriminated against it by the administration, the practical dimension of this discrimination was different from a minority populace surrounded by a hostile majority in society. In India, for example, the hostility of the British authorities towards Indians took the form of paranoid exclusionary state apparatus whose engagement with the populace was minimal outside of violent reprisals. For more in-depth information on the system, see Dev Diary 136. Okay, colonial racialization. It's not radicalization. Racialization represents the phenomenon of racialization in the colonial context, historically the construction of a white or European identity, with many of the disparate European cultures represented among colonial apparatus. It reminds me of Fanon. With this incarnation of subjecthood, those who share heritage with the colonizers will typically be in full acceptance. Colonized people on their homelands will experience a moderate degree of discrimination, and colonized peoples not on their homelands will experience the greatest degree of discrimination. Okay, we see subjecthood, giving us, of course, acceptance from homeland, which is quite nice. We haven't played that many runs since Subjecthood came about, but Subjecthood did seem quite strong in some ways in terms of really giving you quite a bit of acceptance, just not as good for pulling migration. But okay, we see colonial, it's like subjecthood and then multiculturalism, like that transition seems strong. But okay, colonial racialization, extra acceptance from heritage trait, a whole ton of acceptance from heritage trait, and minus acceptance from no shared heritage traits. Interesting. Okay. This is added on top of it, so instead of the 20 we get the 40, and instead of the 15 we get the 30, and then we will get a malice if we don't have it. Okay, I see you. A civil war occurs in a colonial administration. If a civil war occurs in a colonial administration, the revolutionary or succession side will receive an event that allows them to choose a different governing principle law. A similar event will occur if a colonial administration ever becomes independent. You just get to choose? That's very cool. Okay. As an additional improvement for colonial administrations, we have added a new diplomatic action. The change language of administration is included in spheres of influence and allows this is the first time we've ever seen this. It allows a colonial overlord to change the colony's primary culture to match one's own. If, for example, Portugal came into possession of the formerly British Raj, she may use this interaction to switch out the English-speaking administration for the Lusophone one. That certainly makes sense. Very interesting. Is there any edge cases where that's going to be hyper useful? I mean, definitely from an RP perspective, that's going to be neat. I'm just trying to think of making... It's way easier to make someone a subject. I suppose it will matter for acceptance, and also they will culture convert. And so that matters. The biggest thing that language makes a difference in is trying to, or from my recollection, is trying to get subjects with sovereign empire. It helps a lot to swap them onto your language if that were a thing, but if they're already your subject, that's much less of a factor, being able to pull them into your blocks so that you can subjugate them, this type of thing. Okay, electoral confidence. What's that? As it turns out, our team is extremely enthusiastic about electoral fraud. Woohoo! In this time, since the Dev Diary was initially revealed, we have developed a way to generalize it to all nations. All countries with elections now have an electoral confidence value, which reflects the degree of confidence its politically franchised populace has in the elections being free and fair. Having a low electoral confidence negatively affects one's legitimacy. This certainly makes sense. So you'll be fighting for this, and represents the political strength from votes with political strength from wealth. The penalty from having low electoral confidence is offset by a more restricted franchise and other modifiers. So we'll have electoral confidence, and we will see 70% for the Netherlands, which will give less political strength per vote and less legitimacy and more political strength for wealth. Okay, this certainly makes sense. As the nation gets more and more corrupt, it becomes less legitimate and the wealth becomes more and more entrenched. Electoral manipulation has now been made available for all nations except for ones with the tradition of free elections amendment. The tradition of free elections amendment is gained through the same means as the electoral clientelism is abolished. If one chooses not to rig elections for enough elections in a row, one will lose the option to do so unless a sufficiently autocratic ruler takes power. This amendment both increases the legitimacy and makes it more difficult to enact a non-liberal democratic distribution of power law. So that certainly makes sense. So the democracy becomes entrenched. Let's see, tradition of free elections. We cannot manipulate stuff, and minus enactment chance for all these authoritarian ones, and plus 10 legitimacy. That seems pretty good. But we do want to go on to technocracy, right? Interesting. Okay. Or was it oligarchy? Whichever one, I think it was technocracy that gave the free company, but okay. At the start of the election period, countries that do not possess the traditional free elections amendment will receive an event that gives the option to rig the election for a party of choice. Doing so will sharply reduce the electoral confidence. The event shown in Dev Diary 163 remains a specific event for the Hispanophone and Lusophone countries, while all the other countries receive the below event. So we see the right results. Of course, a little bit of rigging, never hurt anyone, except it did. We see this decreases electoral confidence by 15%. So what's the scaling on this? With minus 30%, we're getting minus 12 legitimacy, so a little bit less than 1/2 scaling, so this will represent minus 7 or so legitimacy. But we could change the outcome of the election. Interesting. I hope they make the outcome of the election feel more impactful, because I don't know if I necessarily think that, well, it is impactful, but you're setting it up so that the people you like get elected anyways, just naturally, and so you don't need to meddle, but fair enough. Upon a country enacting electoral law for the first time, it will start with the level of electoral competence calculated on the basis of its literacy and urbanization rates, and any local electoral institutions such as elected bureaucrats that it possesses. Countries that start with a low electoral confidence will also start with a grace period to raise the electoral confidence as much as possible before the full legitimacy balance kicks in. And then we see it looks like a 20-year 20 years to kind of get that in. Electoral confidence is gained through setting up certain options in election events. Generally, options that encourage electoral violence or fraud will reduce electoral confidence, whilst options which encourage confidence in state institutions will increase electoral confidence. There's a little bit of an interesting thing regarding like corruption, which is like the freer your press or more reports of corruption don't necessarily correlate with more corruption, because the freer your press, the more likely that corruption that does exist is to report it. And if you have less corruption, you're more likely to have a freer press. And so you have this interesting phenomenon where sometimes the countries in which there is a lot of corruption reported are actually less corrupt than the ones where there is less reported, because the corruption itself is tamping down the reports of the corruption. If people are scared to speak out, then, or if you don't have a free press or freedom of speech, then it is easier to kind of tamp down on that type of thing. All right, so we see cultural commonwealths. Cultural commonwealth is a new central identity for power block unlocked by Iberian Twilight. Very, very cool. Okay, so we will have a new power block type. Let's sit up straight and kind of lock it. The cultural commonwealth is to culture as the religious convocation is to religion, encouraging a homogeneity among power blocks member states. Did they really? Oh, we're gonna make it so it's all one culture, guys. This isn't gonna be controversial at all. Paradox releasing the genocide patch. Oh no. Impose same citizenship law on power block members. Okay. Unlock shared canon. But is it in same citizenship law is different than making them all the same culture, right? A cultural commonwealth gains cohesion based on the degree to which its leader accepts the primary... Oh, but we can change the subject's culture with that new interaction. Oh, no. No. Not the genocide patch. Not like this. We can change the culture with the change language of administration, right? Or in some part... Oh, my God. They really did it. The cultural commonwealth gains cohesion based on the degrees to which its leader accepts the primary culture of its member states. For example, if Spain were to form a cultural commonwealth, she would receive more cohesion from including Venezuela than she would by inviting Germany. Cultural commonwealths also benefit from the clout of the Intelligentsia of the petite bourgeoisie and suffer decreased cohesion if any member has multiculturalism enacted. Not like this. Oh my God. Okay, the leader of the cultural commonwealth may use the spread primary culture action to spread their primary culture to a less prestigious member of the bloc that shares a language or language group with that culture. Okay, so can we force a language though? Is this possible? It is possible. We have the technology. All right, but they have to be, I think, a colonial subject type for you to be able to do that language change. By skillfully wielding spread primary culture and change language of administration interactions, one may make a hitherto unprecedented number of countries Portuguese. Not like this. We look forward to seeing what our players will do with this. Do you, though? Do you, though? Do you? Okay. The colonial governors, in keeping with Iberian Twilight's content for Spanish colonial administrations, we have reworked the appoint governor interaction included in spheres of influence. The interaction now allows one to appoint one of the several archetypal colonial governors to rule over one's colonies. We do see that we have a bunch of different types. and we see, okay, one is armed forces, so I assume that they're tied to IGs. Yeah, and they are tied to IGs. Fair enough. Okay. We also added the request a new governor interaction, which permits a colony to request a governor on their liking. That'll be probably really nice for the EIC, right? Once a colonial governor is appointed, their term will expire in some years, and they will be replaced by a governor of the same archetype. This cycle will continue until either the metropole or colonial establishment appoints a different archetype. Okay, these archetypes include the following. Okay, so it's not just the interest group then. Colony growth speed, ranches and plantations throughput. Ooh, plantations throughput. We see 10% authority, suppression impact on political movement, conscriptable battalions. Okay, convoys. I think convoys aren't really that important. Minus loan interest rate. State construction efficiency is nice. Oh man, 5% state construction efficiency is EIC is just. You just like blast. We see 15% extraction throughput, which is nice. Colony, extra mortality and colony growth speed. That seems overall pretty good. And then local appointee, minus liberty desire. And also popularity. Okay. Additionally, all heads of state colonial countries start the game have been given one of these traits, which will be inherited by their successors until the end of their terms. All right, fair. And then we have Morocco. Welcome to Morocco. I thought we were going to Brazil. At the start of the game, the ruling Alawi dynasty of Morocco had a fairly limited control over the territories that were recognizable as Morocco on the map at game start. While able to extract tribute from the surrounding tribes and being at least nominally religiously recognized as a ruler of the region's government, the government's ability to enforce its laws upon the tribes was rather limited past the capital of Fez and the cities along the Atlantic coast, as well as Marrakesh. This game is represented by a new journal entry that Morocco receives as part of Iberian Twilight, the Balad al-Siba. So we see we will have lands of anarchy. Womp womp. That's not ideal. They shall face the might of the Mazaken, and we will see... Jesus. Minus 25% state construction efficiency already gives us a heart attack. We also see minus education access and infrastructure. That is a big yikes. And we will see a lot of locations, or a lot of states rather, getting that. This journal entry, you will be tasked with establishing your control over the tribes of Morocco to the end that we have grouped them up by state region and created a progress bar for each of them. And so you're trying to establish control. All right, fair enough. We do like the progress bars. How do we gain progress, though? Your control can be increased by such factors such as developing the capital of the relevant state regions as a whole, having high legitimate or strong military presence. Just putting armies in the HQ. Alright, we see barracks building level. Alright, fair enough. State urbanization, state standard of living, government legitimacy, capital state literacy, capital state infrastructure. Capital of the region or capital? Developing the capital and the relevant state regions as a whole. Okay, so we would probably want to push up the literacy specifically in the capital and just build out the capital a lot, and then barracks don't take a lot of construction anyways, so the construction efficiency balance isn't too bad. Another way to increase your control is to send your sultan off on an expedition around the world, around the country, to physically manifest the control wherever he goes. These tours are traditionally referred to as harka, and while ongoing, you will also receive new events dealing with the troubles of the individual regions where you have made the decision on behalf of His Majesty, further contributing or detracting from the progress you make in each region. We do see we get assemble the Harka, and we will see that we need to not have it already, and we get 20% authority, flat government expense, opposition approval, negative opposition approval, makes sense, and plus enactment time. Plus enactment times is a little bit painful, but also some flat control too, right? Because popularity does give flat control, and then you're going to get, or not flat control, flat authority, and then some flat control to the progress bar. Additionally, you may choose to spread your powers thin by considering a new early opt-in to colonization in the form of expand our reach button, which in exchange for 20 progress across all bars, will enable you to fast-track frontier colonization and, more importantly, establish colonization rights in the Tecna Confederation and Tuat to the south. Tecna and Tuat. Alright, this sounds good. This reminds me I should probably show off the map before we continue with our next topic. While Morocco will be able to subsume Tecna and Tuat fairly quickly, we've also taken it as an opportunity to redraw parts of Maghreb. Alright, very cool. I don't know... I can't just from... I mean, this doesn't look exactly what we're used to, but I can't identify what changes would be different. But okay, we will have a slightly different map as well. And we get to Cuba. Cuba's 19th century, often overshadowed by interest in its revolutionary times, marks a drastic transformation from a loyal subject dependent on slavery to a fiercely independent nation proud of its own culture. In Iberian Twilight, we explore several different paths that at various points appeared to be likely outcomes, or at least perceived likely outcomes, of the path of history. Cuba's population never had extremely high proportion of slaves to white landowners and workers as Haiti, so a slave revolt taking the whole country was never a likely outcome. Nevertheless, the fear of such an outcome and the horror it caused in the white Caribbean population led to a perceived dependence on Spain and its garrisoned armies. Certainly that makes some sense. You get a little bit of flavor text. I do think this is a new artwork. Okay. First, it is impossible to discuss this period of Cuban history without first mentioning its sugar plantations. Cuba was the largest producer in the world at the time, largely due to slave labor. Cuba had agreed to England's insistence on an officially outlawing slave trade, but the Captain Generales appointed to rule Cuba openly collected bribes to turn a blind eye. These practices, there were practices where slaves were dropped elsewhere on the island, a ship formerly docked, and then the slaves walked into the market from out of town, at least make an apparent effort to obfuscate their origin. Man, this is one of my favorite words, obfuscate, specifically the conjugation obfuscatory. But okay, due to its illegal nature, there were even cases where some slavers would board and take other slaves at sea rather than sail to Africa, all while avoiding the British vessels. The slave trade in Cuba continued to flourish not because of the massive expansion of the sugar industry, but because it was considered cheaper to replace slaves than to provide facilities enough for them to keep them or their children alive. Jesus Christ. Only after the cost of slaves increased dramatically and the technological improvements achieved the production of sugar with less labor did the reliance on slave labor decrease and the abolishment of slavery begin in earnest. In the game, this is mechanically represented through the new production methods covered in last week's Dev Diary 163, the fine print in the journal entry La Vida Dulce, which also attributes the island a natural trading potential. We see that we get La Vida Dulce, total exported goods, is something that is tracked. Cuba's come to dominate the sugar trade, largely through the continued smuggling of slaves. Should slavery be abolished, perhaps one day the Cubanos will benefit from a sweeter life. I see what you did there. I see you. So we get extra prestige if completed indefinitely. That's not normally their style here. Okay, but I guess it's not a huge thing. Well, actually... trade advantage indefinitely, I guess, is kind of nice. And we get prestige and maximum trade advantage from capacity. This actually seems pretty good. If slavery is abolished, we will get extra standard of living and more qualifications and more building wage target. Okay, so it's probably... I wonder if you get this early enough that this won't be negative, but you don't want to get your SOL too high because it's going to decrease pop growth. We do see some options here. Toast to our perpetual success. We must use the proceeds to modernize. Imagine our wealth if we broke off from Spain. Option, if slavery is still present, we get success for whom for 30 years. Getting landowner approval, extra slave imports, radicals from political movements, minus plantation tax income, extra throughput, and extra contribution efficiency for the aristocrats. You know, we've made comments on this before, but slavery would be a lot better if they had kind of more standard... What happens is their SOL is just either like 1, like base, before modifiers, or 8 a lot of the time. And like if you were consistently 7, slavery would be a lot better. The slaves die too fast if their SOL is 1 and gets boosted up to 2 or 3 or whatever. Okay, all Cubans should benefit, plus 20% acceptance of Afro-Caribbean culture in Cuba, and then we get decaying for 30 years, qualifications, dependence income, plantations, dependence income is a free money modifier, plantations throughput, very nice, tech spread for society, and society research speed. That's nice too. Trade center building throughput, also very nice. Right to associate in labor unions becomes active. That seems very good. That seems way better than this. And then we use the proceeds to modernize the third option. Maximum innovation investment plus 30. That's a modifier, isn't it? I think the maximum investment otherwise that you can get with 100 literacy, isn't it like 200 with like 50 flat plus 150, something like this? So plus 30 is a lot. And then extra research speed on top of that, which like applies with that. Wow, that's really good. Manufacturing industries throughput 15%, 15% capitalist contribution efficiency. That's a strong modifier. Or dedicate that wealth to pursuing independence, and we gain liberty desire. I think there's other ways to gain liberty desire. If you get a bunch of people supporting your independence, this will help out a lot. So it's probably the weakest one. Speaking of Spain, or being in pain, Spain. All of Spain's other subjects in the Americas have had risen up for independence. Loyal landowners coupled with a large military garrison kept Cuba firmly in the empire, leading to it to be called La Siempre Fiel Isla de Cuba, the ever-faithful island of Cuba. Some of the landowners, known as reformists, sought to have Cuba represented in the Spanish Cortes. This notion that Cuba should not be seen as a colony, but a somewhat distant province of España. In the game, we modeled this path with the Cuba es España journal entry. The completion criteria here, provided in the spheres of influence, uses a new overlord action of granting investment rights to subjects. Otherwise, a simpler objective building plantation applies. New overlord action of granting investment rights to subjects? You could do this before, right? I know granting investment rights to someone to effectively gain is an interesting idea because they have different companies. And so by doing so, you could gain a lot of extra throughput on your companies, though they will have ownership. But do you really care that much if they have ownership, if they're paying out to you anyways? Probably a little bit, but if this is on industries you don't have, this is actually kind of a little bit of a neat thing. And then I think you could also give them a monopoly on the industry to allow them to just buy it all up, which is also interesting. So, okay. If Cuba entwines its economy enough with Spain, they can join and become a single nation. Though it's possible to back out, especially in multiplayer if both players are countries. Ooh. Economically annex Spain as Cuba? Hell yeah, brother. Or is it always Spain annexes Cuba? Alright, Viva España. Spain will annex Cuba. Spain will enable slave trade in slavery. Carabino becomes primary culture of Spain. This sounds like Cuba annexing Spain, but okay. Oh, no, wait, this is added to a primary culture, not the primary culture, a primary culture. Change players actively controlled country from Cuba to Spain. Alright, fair enough. Never mind, we're switching on over. Actually, this is a terrible idea, also true. Cuba gets a means of independence for 5 years, 25% influence, 20 weekly liberty desire. So we're going to choose one of these options. If we should remain some separation. If Spain is a player, they will also have the option to become a protectorate. That's cute. Okay. Meanwhile, this direction can be discarded by sapping the landowner's strength or raising the liberty desire and questioning that ever faithful loyalty. Okay, so liberty desire. Failing the journal entry will allow the player to direct the country down a variety of other paths, including a boost to liberty desire or sending the signal for a slave revolt. See fine print for more details about slave revolt movements, but we will get some modifiers like weekly liberty desire, aristocrats minus contribution efficiency, landowners are pissed. 5% maximum trade advantage from capacity, minus plantation income, and slave revolt movement looking big. If Cuba isn't to remain loyal to Spain, naturally it will seek independence. Historically, there were several attempts to do so through a diplomatic arrangement with the USA and Spain. Similar to how Louisiana and Florida were purchased, so too could Cuba be purchased. In 1848, under President Polk, an offer of $100 million was made, but Spain refused. The island remained valuable to the empire's economy and prestige. Over subsequent decades, Cuba would fight not one but 3 wars for independence, the last culminated in the American-Spanish War. These possible outcomes are represented in the Independence Journal entry here. Depending on the number of factors, the spirit of the liberty will either drive freedom-seeking or uniting with the USA, or to follow Jose Marti's call for true independence. Wow, they're making so much content for Cuba. I feel bad because I think I think the title of the video is going to be about the fact that this is going to be the genocide patch, but really, there's so much stuff for going on for Cuba here. Okay, some factors on the pro-USA Intelligentsia bod is going to be, let's see, base value. USA has incompatible slavery law, power block, economic dependence of the USA, prestige, standard of living, fervor. Oh, we see fervor coming in. Okay, that makes sense as well. You'd certainly not want to become... You'd want your own nation if you have a lot of fervor, right? Very, very cool. Okay. There are some bonuses available no matter what path is taken to breaking away from Spain, including if players want to use the regular mechanics to fight an early war. We will see. We get some other stuff as well. Gained independence from Spain, completely fall into a slave revolt like Haiti. After Cuba's free, minus political activism, extra prestige, extra trade advantage. Okay, fair. Cuban revolutionaries typically freed slaves on their farms or in farms in conflict zones, some of whom would then fight. There was an equivalent button to appeal to Afro-Caribbeans and integrate them into as a primary culture after slavery is banned. Very cool. Afro-Caribbean will... If that's primary culture, then would that make it... Are they in the same group as... I don't know if they're the same group as African-American. I wonder if that makes accepting them easier. Gaining enough liberty desire, the bar leans towards joining the USA will allow Cuba to trigger a chain of events allowing it to be purchased from Spain. If Spain refuses, there may be diplomatic consequences. So, do you get to play as the USA? Or is owned by the United States? Otherwise, let's see. I mean, I guess for USA, this is cool because you get to buy Cuba, maybe. But playing as Cuba, you don't want to get bought by USA if it just annexes you. Otherwise, with enough liberty desires time to prepare for war, note these numbers are still being balanced and are subject to change. Hitting us with the second disclaimer. Let's go. Okay, so prepare for war is going to be morale loss, morale damage, morale recovery, training rate. That doesn't seem too crazy. Okay. Cuba's trade-focused playthrough also benefits from 3 powerful companies allowing them access to prestige good Havana sugar, Bacardi, rum, and cigars. Okay, let's take a look. Migration attraction, aristocrats, investment contribution efficiency. And it's got wood on it. How do we think about this company? So, I guess it depends what your add-on companies are on top of that, but wood is excellent to have. We have, I assume that's prestige sugar, but the aristocrats investment pool contribution efficiency is the most interesting one. I think they changed part of it so that, I'm trying to remember if something was changed to make it so companies weren't mono-capitalist, because this is one of the reasons why you don't go agrarian, generally speaking. And I feel like in my head that there was some change, but I can't remember what it was, to allow aristocrats at least some measure of influence in some of these companies, but still like primarily capitalist. But okay, this is the main thing, is like, can we ever make an agrarian run work or make sense? And having a company that is having enough aristocrat investment pool contribution. No, here's the problem. If it's all owned by capitalists, it doesn't matter how much contribution efficiency you have. Okay, let's continue. We see plus weekly Liberty Desire Arts Academy throughput. It doesn't look like a very good one at all. The Bacardi Company, and then we see the tobacco with the Prestige Tobacco, and technology spread for society. Loyalist spread from political movements. Prestige, it's probably no good. But this top one looks like it's maybe good. Migration attraction is also a difficult modifier to evaluate, but wood companies are generally a little bit hard to come by. If it has rubber on top of it, then it'll probably actually be super cracked, right? Okay. For those looking for a simpler playthrough than mainland Spain, Cuba offers all the opportunities you need to break free and expand trade info. Que los disfrute. Alright, so then we have the Philippines. Advancements in the archipelago, we will see, is going to be if our GDP gets high enough, and our standard of living gets high enough, some things will happen, etc. If completed, we will get impressive development. Alright, and then if failed, we get a bunch of penalties. Fair enough. The Spanish colony of the Philippines starts out with a relatively straightforward economic development strategy, representing the 19th century economic development of the colony and the growth of the local, mostly mestizo middle class. With the release of Iberian Twilight, Filipino cultures will now be split at game start to be Filipino, mestizo, Tagalog, Ilocano, Visayan, and the anarchistically named Lumad, a catch-all term for the various native peoples of Mindanao. Spanish will be the country's only accepted culture at game start, and the country will be primarily run by them and their Hispanophone mestizo allies. But the situation of the majority rule can now be remedied by the new Philippine narrative content. Once you research nationalism, you will be presented with 2 new journal entries. We will see, we can't zoom in more? No, not like this. Can we? No. What a world. Okay, so, we will conclude in reliance outcome if we are a subject or an overlord of Spain, legitimacy of Philippines, greater, etc. And then here, let's just read through it, whatever they have to say down here. All right. The first of these details deals with the growing desire for independence or greater rights vis-a-vis Spanish metropolis. Its conclusion, achieved by either tying yourself more firmly to Spain or achieving full independence, will empower the Filipino mestizo population to the point where they will be established as the country's new primary culture. Attached to this journal entry is also an event chain about the conflict between Spanish and local-born Filipino friars, as well as the evolution of the so-called Iostros, Liestrados, a group of Spanish-educated Filipino intellectuals whose names would strongly resonate with anyone, even the most remote interest in the modern history of the Philippines. Let's actually zoom in a little. Oh, we can't read it because we can't zoom in. Not like this. All right, we do see, we can kind of read the Istrado here. We like cultural exclusion, we hate ethno-state, we like no police or dedicated police, guaranteed liberties, protected speech. All right, fair enough. The second journal entry with the archipelago ethnogenesis is all about the creation of a pan-Philippinic national identity. And we'll see, this is like something I like kind of focusing on, is they often build off of the mechanics they make. They like introduce the mechanics and then they build off of it. The creation of like a national identity like dovetails really well from the last patch, like giving rise to like this nationalism as a mechanic, and will grant you powerful assimilation bonuses as a reward on top of the creation of a new national culture. Depending on your relationship with Spain, this cultural language can either be Hispanophone or Philippinic. And then we have Haiti / Dominican Republic. If there's one thing that the developers and players can agree on, it's that Haiti is overpowered and currently playing it's far too easy. So have no fear, because we've added Dominican Revolution to content to the game to give you, the community, the Haiti nerf you've all been clamoring for. Haiti will now start the game with a rather powerful Dominican national movement operating in its lands, uniting Spanish, Carabinos, and Afro-Carabinos under one banner. Other than the usual factors, their strength is also based on your debt level, so getting your economy in order is more of a priority now if you want to keep the rebellious East under your control. But what if you want to be the rebellion? Okay, one and indivisible, yeah, with liberty and justice for the new people. Okay. Should this movement be politically relevant a couple of years in the game, Haiti will get to the one and indivisible journal entry that will spike Dominican resistance to Haitian rule even further. And so we will see rebels seize the Puerta de Conde. Right, fair. In turn, the start of a Dominican secession will cause the journal entry to fail and the Dominican rebels to rally behind the greater landowner Pedro Santana, whose strong leadership, wealth, access to large numbers of laborers turned militiamen will be a decisive factor in the historical Dominican War for Independence. And so we do get a little bit of some events about that. Once independent, the new Dominican style. Don't you mean that we lose the rebellion and we game over in Brick? No, okay, so obviously you're supposed to be the Dominican Republic then. Once independent, the Dominican Republic may seek protection from... Oh, wait. Is this when the rebellion pops? And they're independent rather than once they win the rebellion? Okay. The Republic may see protection from a foreign power to safeguard its territorial integrity against Haiti. Historically, Pedro Santana and his supporters would sideline the advocates of full Dominican independence and petition Spain for annexation, but these are also those who argue that the Santo Domingo should seek the protection of France or the United States instead. The latter, however, would come at the cost of establishment of the lease of Samana Peninsula, whose location and ability to support ports facilities made it quite desirable in the eyes of American and French statesmen and naval officers. You can, of course, choose to rely on your own strength instead. Once ceded, the Samana Treaty will contain most of San Domingo's Afro-American population, a legacy of the early mid-19th century Haitian immigration scheme. So we do see a little bit of a treaty port there. It's kind of hard to make out on the recording, but next time on I Woke Up a Producer and the Narrative Designers Can't Stop Writing, as said in last Dev Diary, we will be covering Portugal in its entirety. Yeah, they do be the content design devs do be writing long dev diaries. Also, please remember what we mentioned in Dev Diary 164, where mods will be broken from changes made. Iberian Twilight releases on December 11th, just under a month away, so mark the date. And so we will be getting the genocide patch. I probably even shouldn't be saying the word for the YouTube algorithm. We'll have to figure out some way to put it in code. But you will be able to replace other cultures with, of course, your more superior culture. And what culture is that, you ask? It doesn't matter, because it's whichever culture you pick. We first abolished the language, and then not like this. We abolished the language, and then we forced them to change the culture for our cultural commonwealth, one nation under one culture, except it spans larger and is multiple nations because it's a power block, not like this. But other than that, happy Wednesday on a Monday. No, Monday on a Wednesday. That's the one. Bye-bye now.